On a cold February evening in 2015, one wrong choice led to the deadliest crash in Metro North's history. 6 people never made it home. For 9 years, investigators struggled with one haunting question. Why did the experienced driver move forward into the path of an oncoming train when she could have simply backed up? This is the Valhalla crash, a story that will make you think twice every time you approach a railroad crossing. Valhalla is a small community with a population of 3,213 as of 2020, located in southeastern New York State. It sits about 47 miles west of New Haven, Connecticut, and 25.5 miles north of New York City. Valhalla is located on the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Harlem Line, a single-to-quad-tracked, mostly electrified commuter rail connecting Grand Central Terminal in New York City to Wasaic Station in Dutchess County. This 82-mile line, built between 1831 and 1871, has 38 stations and is primarily used by commuter trains. Metro North Train 659 was a commuter service running from New York City to Wasaic Station. The train consisted of 4 two-car Bombardier M7A electric units, introduced in 2004. Each unit is 170 feet long, weighs 57.5 metric tons, and can seat up to 211 passengers across the 2 cars. The train gets its power from a third rail located close to the ground on the left-hand side, similar to the New York City subway. Each unit is equipped with flashing front lights to warn cars and pedestrians at level crossings. On the day of the accident, Train 659 was led by car number 4333 and carried 645 passengers, along with 2 crew members. About 20 passengers were seated in the lead car at the time of the crash. Heading north on Commerce Street was a black 2011 Mercedes-Benz W166ML Class SUV. This midsize vehicle was second vehicle that involved in this crash. It was 4.83 meters long, weighed about 2.2 metric tons, and featured an automatic gearbox controlled by a stalk on the steering column. On February 3, 2015, Ellen Brody, 49 years old, was driving south on the Taconic State Parkway, which runs parallel to the rail line. Around 5:25 p.m., there was an unrelated accident at an intersection, which closed the parkway's right-hand lane. Because of this, Ellen had to take a detour. She turned right onto Lakeview Avenue, crossed over the train tracks, and then turned right again onto Commerce Street. Now driving north, she needed to cross the train tracks one more time before turning right to get back onto the left-hand lane of the Taconic State Parkway. This new route was meant to help her avoid the accident and continue her journey to Scarsdale. Driving behind Ellen Brody was Mr. Hope, who later described heavy traffic on Commerce Street due to the detour, with vehicles inching along in bumper-to-bumper conditions as drivers tried to re-enter the parkway. The congestion caused cars on Commerce Street to stop ahead of the level crossing. At approximately 6:23 p.m., Brody stopped her SUV just beyond the crossing stop line, with the vehicle positioned ahead of the tracks. Moments later, the crossing lights activated, followed by the barriers lowering. The southwest barrier came down onto the back of her SUV, trapping it on the tracks. With no cars directly behind him, Mr. Hope backed up his car a few feet to give Ellen Brody more space to move her SUV off the train tracks. He saw Ellen get out of her car and walk to the back. She touched or tried to move the crossing barrier that had fallen off her car's roof and was stuck behind it. It seemed like Ellen was either checking her car for damage or trying to remove the stuck barrier. This made Mr. Hope believe that her SUV wasn't actually on the train tracks. At one moment, Ellen looked directly at him, but she didn't react to his hand signals, which were urging her to move to the safe side of the barrier, whether with her car or on foot. Instead, Brody returned to the SUV. Rather than reversing, the car suddenly moved forward onto the train tracks. Moments later, a train approached and crashed into the SUV, pushing it off the crossing. Mr. Hope later described the scene, saying the car was destroyed and gone in an instant. The train's engineer, Mr. Smalls, later told investigators that he first saw a reflection in the distance when the train was about 370 meters away from the crossing. A few moments later, he realized the reflection was coming from the front of a black SUV. which was partly sticking into the train's path. Reacting immediately, Mr. Smalls sounded the horn and initiated an emergency stop while traveling at 59 miles per hour, hoping to reduce the impact's severity. As the train approached, just 85 feet from the crossing, the SUV suddenly moved forward, completely blocking the train's path. At exactly 6:26 p.m., train 659 struck the passenger side of the SUV at a speed of 51 miles per hour, resulting in a catastrophic collision. The impact of the collision tore the rail line's third rail from its mounts, sending it crashing through the SUV's body and into the fuel tank, which ruptured on impact. The third rail then went through the floor of the front train car and continued into the inside. When the fuel tank exploded, the SUV caught fire, and the flames quickly spread halfway down the front train car. The train and SUV finally stopped 203 meters past the crossing, with the SUV and the back half of the front train car fully engulfed in flames. Ellen Brody was killed instantly in the crash, while 5 train passengers died, and 15 others were injured. The crash severely disrupted the railroad's electrical system, delaying the power shutdown on the affected track. Power to the third rail east of the crossing was cut off within 8 seconds of the collision. However, the section west of the crossing stayed active, continuing to supply electricity to the rear train cars for another 90 seconds until it was manually turned off. After the train stopped, Mr. Smalls managed to escape the smoke-filled driver's cab. Despite the danger, he repeatedly went back into the burning train to help rescue passengers. At the same time, passengers in the second car tried to reach the front car to assist with the rescue efforts. However, they had to give up as the fire spread quickly, making it too dangerous to continue. The collision tore up 140 meters of the third rail, breaking it into several sections, each about 12 meters long. Most of these pieces ended up stuck inside the front train car, while a few pierced through the front wall of the second car, reaching as high as the ceiling. 5 passengers on the train were killed by blunt force trauma when they were struck by the rail pieces. The cause of death for a 6th victim could not be determined because of the extreme damage caused by the fire. Emergency services were alerted at 6:28 p.m., less than 2 minutes after the collision, and arrived on site at 6:34 p.m. The fire department found the leading train car fully engulfed in flames, but was able to prevent the fire from spreading to the second car. A triage area was set up at the level crossing to assist those affected by the crash. Passengers who were uninjured were taken to a nearby gym to stay warm before being transported home by bus or taxi. Meanwhile, a police helicopter with thermal cameras searched the nearby cemetery and surrounding areas for any survivors who might have wandered away in the dark, but no additional victims were found. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched an investigation into the accident, sending investigators to the site just hours after it occurred. They were particularly concerned about the unusually high death toll. Typically, in level crossing collisions, the train sweeps the vehicle off the tracks with minimal impact on the train's passengers, especially if the train remains on the rails. Another important area of investigation was the design of Metro-North's third rail system. While third rail systems are common in U.S. commuter rail networks, most use a design where a shoe on the train makes contact with the top of the rail, similar to how slot cars receive power. Metro-North's system was different, which raised concerns about whether its design contributed to the severity of the crash. Metro-North uses an underrunning third rail system, where hook-shaped shoes on the trains pick up electricity from the underside of a covered rail. This design offers advantages, including better protection against ice buildup, which could disrupt operations, and reduced risk of accidental contact with the rail. In this system, the ends of the third rail at level crossings are slightly angled upward in a wedge shape to catch the train's pickup shoe. The rail is made of rolled steel and weighs about 68 kilograms per meter. It is installed in 12-meter sections, although these sections can be shortened if needed during installation. The third rail can be mounted on either side of the track because trains have pickup shoes on both sides to work with this flexible setup. In an interview with NTSB investigators, Metro-North's power director explained that, to his knowledge, the third rail system was designed to break away from the train during certain accidents. He noted that when a large force is applied perpendicular to the direction of the tracks, the rail should break off at the splice bars between sections. This theory was based on a 1984 collision at the Commerce Street level crossing, where the third rail had broken off and fallen away from the train, reducing damage. After examining the wreckage of the train and SUV, investigators theorized that the third rail had gone through the SUV, entering beneath the rear seats and exiting behind the right rear wheel in a straight path. It then became stuck in the front bogie of the train, pushing it upwards. The investigators also considered whether the third rail's underrunning design, which sits slightly higher off the ground, played a role in the crash. However, this theory could not be definitively proven due to the many variables in the accident, which made reliable testing difficult. The pieces of third rail continued to penetrate the leading train car at two separate points, coming through the floor about 10 feet apart in the forward section of the car. One piece of third rail extended the entire length of the car, puncturing the second car between the exterior roof and interior ceiling. Additionally, another piece of third rail became lodged in the rear door of the leading car, which hindered efforts by passengers from the second car to reach the front and assist in the rescue of others. Cell phone records revealed that Miss Brody had been talking to her husband up until 6 minutes before the accident, which ruled out the possibility of her being distracted by her phone, a common issue in U.S. road traffic. Her husband recalled that she appeared unsure of her location at that time. Local residents and regular commuters noted that the area around the accident site could be confusing, even for locals. One person mentioned that water often pooled on the road just a few feet from the crossing, requiring early braking on the slight downhill approach. However, neither the conditions at the site nor Miss Brody's behavior supported the theory that the SUV had slid into the crossing due to ice buildup. Additionally, statements from her husband regarding her sleep cycle made excessive fatigue an unlikely factor in the accident. Investigators obtained an identical SUV and recreated the final moments before the accident. They placed a matching train on the tracks ahead of the crossing to simulate the situation. They found that the train's horn would have been loud enough for Ellen Brody to hear inside the car, even if she had the heater or radio on. However, they also discovered that after she got out of the SUV, the car and a nearby substation would have blocked her view of the train's approach, making it harder for her to see it coming. It was believed that when Ellen Brody heard the barrier hit her car, which she had only bought 2 months before the accident, her attention may have shifted to checking for damage. This distraction, combined with being in an unfamiliar location in the dark, likely took up most of her focus. The position of the car and nearby substation would have further blocked her view of the approaching train. Sadly, she likely didn't notice the headlights or the gestures from other drivers either. Statements from Mr. Hope and Mr. Smalls confirmed that the SUV wasn't fully on the tracks until just moments before the crash. This suggests that if Ellen had glanced down while standing behind her car, she would have only seen the road and not the train tracks. The report also noted that the SUV used by Ellen Brody, as well as the one used by investigators, had a shifter mounted on the right side of the steering column, unlike the traditional position between the front seats. Ellen had recently bought this SUV, switching from a car where the shifter was in the usual location. However, her husband didn't remember her mentioning any trouble adjusting to the new setup. He also found it easy to get used to, suggesting that the position of the shifter probably didn't play a role in the accident. The investigation ultimately placed sole blame for the accident on Miss Brody. It theorized that she accidentally rolled into the crossing and was initially distracted by the barrier hitting her car. The position of her vehicle, relative to the approaching train, obscured the train's visibility. She likely realized she was trapped on the crossing, but didn't notice the approaching train and attempted to drive forward, likely trying to clear the barrier. Tragically, this put her directly in the path of the train, leaving the train driver with no chance to stop in time. It's possible that Miss Brody never realized how close the train was. Investigators then focused on the fatal fire inside the train, which, while not directly responsible for at least 5 of the 6 deaths, made the accident much worse. They examined the third rail pieces recovered from the wreckage and found no signs of electrical arcing, which ruled out the usual cause of fires in these situations. Instead, They concluded that the fire started when the third rail ruptured the SUV's fuel tank, causing fuel to spill onto hot metal and sparks. The flames then spread along the tracks beneath the train. The third rail pieces likely entered the train already on fire, carrying burning fuel and debris with them. The holes left by the rail pieces allowed the fire to spread deeper into the car's interior. Investigators also pointed out that the polymer-based plastic cover of the third rail played a big part in the fire's rapid spread. It ignited, melted, and stuck to various surfaces, making the blaze much more intense. Passengers in the center and rear of the train were able to evacuate through emergency exits, bypassing the jammed rear door. This allowed them to escape the danger, preventing additional injuries or deaths. The report reiterated that none of the fatalities were directly caused by the fire. One passenger's cause of death remained uncertain, while the others died from blunt force trauma, most likely from the initial collision and debris from the third rail. After the first car's interior was completely burned, investigators tested samples from the second car's seat upholstery, wall panels, and light fixtures to see how they reacted to the fire. Although these materials had passed fire safety standards when they were first introduced in 2000, tests after the accident showed that some no longer met the same standards. Specifically, the upholstery, seat back, and cushioning materials didn't pass federal standards, although the cushioning on the backrest still complied. It was also noted that regulations only require a single test when materials are first introduced, not periodic retesting. Survivors reported that while the fire spread slowly, it didn't significantly interfere with evacuation efforts. The report published in July 2017 placed full blame on Ellen Brody, attributing the accident to distractions that caused her to lose situational awareness. 3 of the 4 investigators issued individual statements alongside the report. 2 of them agreed with the findings, while the third, Mr. Weiner, disagreed. He criticized the speculation about Miss Brody's motives, acknowledging that her loss of situational awareness was likely, but felt the investigation had gone into wild guessing about why it happened. He also expressed dissatisfaction with how the investigation overlooked certain factors, saying, "I am left unsatisfied as to how the configuration of this angled crossing, the signage approaching the crossing, the deterrent effect of existing New York rail crossing statutes, and the New York State driver education regarding rail crossing safety may have affected these events." He also raised concerns about whether the general public was adequately informed that railway barriers are designed to break away easily. This is a common knowledge gap, as many people seem to expect severe damage to their vehicles if they try to drive through lowered barriers. In the months following the accident, 34 different claims were filed against the railway company as a first step towards lawsuits. These claims mostly came from survivors or the families of victims, including the Brody family. Their lawyer argued that money allocated for a 2009 improvement, which should have been used to bring the crossing signage up to federal standards, was never spent. Additionally, the widow of Robert Dirks, a famous chemist, filed claims against the town, county, Metro North, and Mr. Smalls. She argued that Mr. Smalls had sounded the horn for only 5 seconds before triggering an emergency stop, suggesting that he could have arranged for a slower collision with potentially less severe consequences. In response, Mr. Smalls argued that he acted according to his training, which instructed train operators not to use emergency stops as a first option due to the risk of injuring passengers who may be standing on the train. In 2018, it was revealed that Mr. Smalls had reached an undisclosed settlement for a legal claim he filed against the local transit authority and had never returned to work due to post-traumatic stress disorder caused by the accident. Attorneys involved in the ongoing lawsuits accused the transit authority of buying his silence, as Mr. Smalls withdrew from any further legal action related to the crash. By 2019, several lawsuits were still ongoing, with the focus shifting mainly to the choice and design of the third rail. Several plaintiffs, including Miss Brody's widower, disagreed with the NTSB's decision to place sole blame on her actions. As we conclude this documentary, we're left with many questions. Was this tragedy the result of human error, flawed safety systems, or both? Could better design or warnings have prevented it? We want to hear your thoughts. What do you think caused this accident, and what can be done to prevent similar ones in the future? Share your views in the comments below. Let's start the conversation.